2021. So with that, I will introduce Reverend Lewis. Lloyd Alexander Lewis Jr., Professor of New Testament Emeritus at the Virginia Theological Seminary, was born in Washington, D.C. on the 12th of November, 1947, and raised in Alexandria, the son of Lloyd Alexander and Alice Bell Lewis. Educated as a child at Burgundy Farm Country Day School, he became the first African-American to attend and be graduated from St. Stephen's School for Boys in Alexandria in 1965. Lewis entered Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, graduating with an A.B. in Classics in 1969. A son of Meade Memorial Episcopal Church in Alexandria, where he was an acolyte, upon graduating from college, he entered the Virginia Theological Seminary to prepare for ordination in the Episcopal Church. Ordained a deacon and a priest in 1972, he served in parishes in New York, Connecticut, and Washington, D.C. In 1978, he was elected to the faculty of the Virginia Theological Seminary, and in 1985, Yale University conferred on him a PhD in New Testament studies. From 1991 to 2000, he was Dean of George Mercer Memorial School of Theology and Bishop's Deputy for Education in the Episcopal Diocese of Long Island. He is one of two canons theologians to the Bishop of Long Island. Upon his return to Virginia Theological Seminary faculty in 2000, he was named Professor of New Testament Studies and was made the Molly Laird Down Professor of New Testament, the position he held until his retirement in December of 2012. He has represented the Episcopal Church as a member of the Program for Theological Education of the World Council of Churches in Prague, Czechoslovakia. I had to practice that a couple times. And has served as a member of the General Board of Examining Chaplains of the Episcopal Church, which creates and evaluates the National General Ordination Examination. He has been honored by Virginia Seminary, who awarded him the degree of Doctor of Divinity and has conferred on him emeritus status. He has also been elected to the African American Hall of Fame in the city of Alexandria, Virginia. He is a parishioner at St. Paul's Parish in Washington, D.C., where he is an honorary assistant priest. It is truly my pleasure to introduce the Reverend Dr. Tony Lewis, class of 1965.
Thanks, Kiki. Well, first of all, warm greetings to all of the St. Stephen's St. Agnes School alumni of color who are attending this reunion event during the course of today, including yesterday. It's wonderful to be able to see so many of you all here. As Kiki said, I'm officially Lord Alexander Lewis, but I really am much better known as Tony. I'm a native of Alexandria. I was actually born at Freedman's Hospital at Howard U, but my parents raised me here in Alexandria, and most of my life's been spent in this area. It's the community that brought me up and the community to which I continue to give back. I'm an Episcopal priest, an educator, and as of 2012, a retired seminary professor. I'm glad to say that I am different. And my 4 years at St. Stephen's School 60 years ago helped to teach me to be so. I certainly hope that my life continues to make some difference for others, because if so, then I really think that my living really has not been in vain. I'm the son of parents who would be described as strivers. My father was a Black businessman in Alexandria, and my mother was a secretary at Parker Gray High School, the one Black high school in Alexandria, Virginia. My parents believed in the power of education and were steeped in the idea of paying forward. They chose to see that their only son received the best education they could afford. In my case, it was a private school education. I have never attended a public educational institution in my life. First, at the only desegregated elementary school in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and then in high school at St. Stephen's. At the end of the 8th grade, I applied to 2 schools, to St. Albans in DC and St. Stephen's. As it happened, I was accepted at both. So with about 50 other people, I became members of the St. Stephen's School class of 1965. And that's where this story that I'm going to tell is going to begin. Now I want to show you something. This is show and tell time. And there it is. I don't know whether or not it can be seen. I don't know how this works. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But if you were to see this, this is my St. Stephen's High School diploma. And it's one of the proudest possessions that I have. It hangs on the wall underneath the other diplomas that I have, including a doctorate from Yale. The Yale degree really rests on the St. Stephen's diploma because the St. Stephen's diploma, I believe, is the foundation for all of my learning over the years. Now, the story of that diploma, however, is different because if you turn it around and look on the back of it, you'll find that there is a Xeroxed article on the back of it from the Washington Post. And it was dated on the 4th of October, 1961. And I'm going to read you what that story says from the Post. It says, St. Stephen's admits first Negro. And then it goes on. St. Stephen's School in Alexandria admitted its first Negro student this fall as quietly as possible. Headmaster Emmett Hoy reported yesterday that the Episcopal Church school's routine was undisturbed. I had already been in class for a month at that point, but that didn't make a difference. Mr. Hoy said that one student was withdrawn from school because of the admission. The Negro boy was the first ever to apply, the minister said. St. Stephen's has 384 boys enrolled from third graders through 12th-year students. It is one of 7 schools operated by the Episcopal Diocese of Virginia. The son of segregationist Senator James O. Eastland, Democrat of Mississippi, is also a student at the school. He is Woods Eastland, a member of the football team. Mrs. Eastland said yesterday she would prefer not to comment on whether her son would be withdrawn from the school now that it was desegregated. Her son was withdrawn from Sidwell Friends School in Washington in 1956 when that school was desegregated. Note, Woods did not leave. The reality that I was soon to be going from being a minority at the school where I had attended before to being a token was not lost on me when I was 13 years old. Being the only Black student at the school was not a problem for me, as I remember it, and I don't think it was for the majority of those who were there with me. I was one of 384. Most young people learn how to carve out their own way forward and figure out who are and who are not one's friends. My own path, social and otherwise, was determined by who and what I was. When my parents were interviewed before my admission to St. Stephen's, they were asked, Mr. and Mrs. Lewis, does your son play football? And my parents said, no. Does he play basketball? And my parents said, no. Does he play baseball? And my parents said, no. And then my father said, my son reads books. That was my particular corner. I came to St. Stephen's School to be an academic, and the rest was incidental. That was going to be the place where I would be focused. And because of it, I was fortunate to get one of the best Eurocentric educations I could possibly have received. I began my training as a Latinist in high school, and my Latin teachers were particularly excellent. They were the ones who inspired me to choose to major in the classics. And that study of languages has remained with me as my vocation continued to develop into what it has become. But I'd also learned to be amphibious, as many of us who were minorities learned how to be. That is, we learned that there is more to the world than what is found in Europe. So my total education was guaranteed by being part of the Black community in Alexandria. It was solidified by the fact that I belonged to a Black church. Because my mother's work, from as long as I could remember, had been in the public school system in Alexandria, I had a parallel existence at the Black public high school that many of my cousins had attended. And because I was also a musician, I was fortunate enough to study twice a week at the same time that I was at St. Stephen's in the Department of Music at Howard University. Those other parts of my education, including something less formal, which I call listening to old people in my community kept me grounded during my 4 St. Stephen's years. But back to St. Stephen's. Many things that now are understood as essential parts of learning were not part of the stated teaching of the school back then, besides music. There was no expectation of community service, and save for some serious and creative questions raised in what you might have called senior theology class that looked at social ethics, it seems in some ways that learning was separated from living. That despite the fact that my 4 years coincided with some of the most crucial moments in the history of the civil rights movement. But the seeds of national and community concern did get planted for me and for my classmates, small though they may have been. And in my case, that other part of my life, the life that opened up when I folded the books and went home, guaranteed it that those seeds would flourish. Curriculum, you know, is important, and inclusivity in curriculum is crucial, the more so the better. But no curriculum in and by itself can make one into a whole human being. More is needed to accomplish that. Now, to be totally honest, it has only been in the last 20 years or so that I've intentionally reconnected with St. Stephen's St. Agnes School. And that is in no small way because of the school's reaching out to me, even though I lived for most of my vacation right across the street from the school that I attended. In recent years, I've served as a member of the school's board, and through that, I've met with alums and parents of color that certainly didn't exist in the same way when I was a student or even as an alumnus for years. Not long ago, during a gathering over Alumni Weekend, I finally met for the first time the woman who had been the first Black alumna of St. Agnes. And we find ourselves telling stories of being it at our respective institutions. At the time of the last transition in school leadership, I served as a member of the committee that eventually called Ms. Adams. Now, even now, I don't live far from the 3 campuses of the school. But after all these years, and you can throw in a pandemic to spice things up, I have experienced in recent years a growth in my own sense of connection to what the school is actually doing. I like your website. I like our website, I suppose I should say. And I followed with great interest what the faculty looks like. And I've read about what is being taught at the school, feeling comfortable as an alumnus to raising questions about our school as an educational institution and what it is teaching and how that is being done. I do not think that this constitutes an insignificant part of the task of anyone who is an alumnus or alumna of an institution. It accomplishes in its own small way the bookend to the words of that article from the Post with which I began, the words that spoke of my admission to the school as being done as quietly as possible. No matter what our experiences might have been here, dare I say that in some ways, graduates of an institution have an ongoing vocation to do what the late Congressman John Robert Lewis said people should do when he called on them to make good trouble. In that way, instead, we find our task in speaking to our school the way that we can be as noisy as possible. So, especially to any of the seniors who are getting ready to graduate, who happen to be part of this Zoom call, welcome to making lots of noise. And congratulations on your graduation from our school. There,